everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I'm Tim Stein, and as always, I'm joined with my colleagues in conversation, Dan Drake, Wendy Conquest, and Jeannie Vitoni. Today, we're going to be talking about communication and effective communication. We've got Sherod Miller, who's joining us, and Dan Lord. They have put together workbooks on what they call the awareness wheel, which is a tool I love. I'm really excited about it. Two workbooks, one that focuses on a tool for inner awareness, and a second one that focus on is expanding your interaction skills. And they've got some websites that have information on that, awarenesswheel.com and couplescommunication.com. I love that we're talking about communication today. I know that in the work that we do with addicts and partners, communication can break down so easily, and there's so many reactive kind of situations or inner experiences that come up that can sort of derail that. So I'm really excited about talking about this today and, giving our listeners maybe some tips on what they can do to improve their communication. What are your guys' thoughts as we're walking into this conversation?
Yeah, I'm really excited about having them on as well, Tim. With sex addiction and betrayal trauma, communication between couples is challenging enough, but when you have that dynamic and you have the reactivity from the partners being betrayed, that trauma, and then you have the addict's trauma, what I found is that they just ping pong off of each other. And so they're not ever really able to communicate or be seen and heard because they're so activated. And so my understanding is that Dan and Sherrod are going to talk about, that's part of what they're going to talk about, is how to manage nervous system deregulation. So I'm very excited about hearing what they have to say.
Yeah, anytime I see so many of my couples get so reactive, and just ways that we can slow this down, all the inner work, so we become more responsive and reactive. So I'm actually excited. I think this is going to be really great to talk through the awareness wheel and help a lot of people, because people are craving tools, helpful tools.
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking how everybody needs help and growth and assistance and reminders with communication skills. And the fact that these folks have some neuroscience behind it, tried and true practices, and there's workbooks even. I mean, that's a really way to bring it home and apply it in your life today. So I'm interested in, I'm always open to more learning.
Well, Sherrod and Dan, would you join us today, please?
Hello, everyone.
Hey, welcome, Dan.
Welcome.
Hey, Dan.
Oh, Sherrod's coming.
I think it's on the way.
There we are.
There it is.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Welcome
you.
to you both.
Sherrod and Dan, before we talk about what the awareness wheel is, how did it come about?
I better take that one, Dan.
Yeah, it's about a half-century journey here, but Sherrod can give you the short story here.
All right.
Many years ago, I was at the University of Minnesota in the outpatient psychiatry department, and this was kind of the main framework, I guess, was analytic. And Virginia Satir came along, and I got to know her quite well. It's part of a small group. She was flying into Minneapolis. At the same time, I was doing a lot of reading in early systems and a journal called Family Process, which was full of great information. And there was a journal called Radical Therapist. I think it was one of those journals that happen 2 issues and disappear. But I remember one of the things was, how could we give tools to our clients to help them live their daily lives more effectively? How can we share the magic? And so with that kind of mindset, things moved. I ended up back in graduate school at the University of Minnesota, and with a couple of colleagues, and we developed a program for couples. It was really, I'd put it in the psychoeducation area, although a lot of therapists also use it in their practice in the actual treatment process as well. So anyway, we developed this program. called couple communication, and it really has some basic, I'll call them maps or frameworks that we teach to couples to understand themselves better. And so over time, I've been the single thread in the development of this wheel and keeping it going. And these last workbooks are something I've always wanted to write for a number of years just on the wheel. And Dan, who I've known for years, is also a certified couple communication instructor. We decided to join together, and he brings his really expertise in neuroscience to understanding the wheel better, and this whole business of reactivity and how to shift out.
So just so that our listeners sort of have a frame of reference, can you give us sort of the Cliff Note version of what is the awareness wheel?
Okay, imagine a circle uh, and then spokes, and there are 5 zones. And the zones really relate to the history of psychology. Perception, cognition, I'll keep going around, emotion or affect, motivation, and behavior. So we translate those. Let me start with, say, kind of in your mind, go up to about 11 o'clock on a clock. And that's, we call that action. And there are little subcategories, past, current, and future in that zone. So that zone is my behavior. What I'm right now, my behavior is I'm talking to you. Earlier today, I did such and such. Tomorrow, I'm planning so and so. So this is my action. Next, going clockwise around, next thing is, we call it sensory data. What I observe from the outside world, what I hear, see, smell, touch, taste, again, touch and taste, as well as the inside world. So when I feel literally physical pain, or an upset stomach, or fatigue, or also in that inside world is my recall, a memory of an event. And so that can be live data internally in my mind right now is real and as impactful as anything somebody walks in the room and says something. It's another part of our reality. Continuing to the next zone is the thought zone. And here are my beliefs, my assumptions, expectations, interpretations, all kinds of things that I think about, ideas, all kind of go in there, obviously. Then the next zone is the emotion zone, and they're the range of feelings from, excited to pleased to scared to angry to, I'm sorry, but that's my background here, of thing going on. Anyway, the whole range of emotion goes in that zone. Then the next and kind of last one, the 5th one here, is wants. What is it I want or desire at any point in time? Now, let me tell you that when we first developed this wheel, we had these dimensions, and we got to wants. It was wants for self. I mean, it was all about me, what I wanted. When we were working with couples and we didn't really realize it, we were teaching them each to be flaming narcissists. In the sense, we would have them tune into all these parts, and here's her part and his part, and they're got all this awareness, and she's saying I want and he's saying I want, and we had them going like this, pulling on each other, locked up. Then there came a day, it occurred to me, and I won't go into how we got here exactly, but something's missing, and what was missing was wants for other. Now, what's typical is when I think of you, or the first thing we think about, in fact, I'll ask people, how many of you worry about what people think of you? You know, hands will go up. So you have some bad news. Most of the time, no one's thinking of you.
Mhm.
And then I'll ask, you know, who are they thinking about? Well, they're thinking about themselves. That's what is so powerful for all of us. So when we talk about wants, what's important is wants for self. That's a little subcategory in the want zone. Then when you think about others, what are my wants for other, not just from other? It's easy to ask, what do I want from you? But when we talk about wants for other, it's based on the other's interest. So as I've heard you talk, say we're in a conflict, what your interests are is there something in that that I can want for you and help you get, or that we can build into this resolution? That was transformation. And then we have stakeholders there, and those are the people who are going to be impacted by the decision we make. So what happens is you have in the want zone, this can be really important. You're thinking systemically, not just about my thing.
Hey, Sherrod, do you think you could just sort of verbally walk us through an example of how somebody might use the awareness wheel as they're trying to sort of communicate or manage a situation?
Before we get to that, Tim, I'm
Sure.
curious of the neuroscience side from Dan.
Hmm.
How does the neuroscience come into the wheel before we
Please,
do
good.
examples? And then Dan, I understand you're the neuroscience guy, so I love that. I love science. I geek out about that stuff. So,
Well, I should be very clear. I am not a neuroscientist. My
all
career
right.
has been as a professor of marriage and family therapy. So I directed a graduate program at Friends University here in Wichita, Kansas. But as Sherrod said, I've been long involved in the couple communication. In fact, my wife and I were one of the early ones to take couple communication training in 1975.
Mm.
And right out of shoot here, we then got hooked on it and became instructors and taught it during, off and on all the locations where we were in. So, but in my role at the university, I did find that during my career, I was very fortunate in that it was just the blossoming of neuroscience. I mean, amazing what we learn about the brain when you can study them living instead of dissected. And so I really found it important to do my best to try to interpret or translate rather complex information and science into workable, more simplistic. And of course, with simplistic efforts, some accuracy drops out. But if you can't grasp the main points, then everything remains out of reach for you. So that's been my approach in my profession and what I brought here. And in our second workbook, I tried to condense a pretty broad-based look at the brain into 12 pages with a number of different diagrams to help capture. And basically, the important thing we're trying, I thought we wanted to accomplish in this is to get the idea that reactivity is actually a bottom-up kind of experience. It is a body response. And to understand that is helpful to know the neural system and the basic idea that there are two branches. One that's organized to save our life when we're under immediate danger, and the other's meant to save our life when we can leave the immediate danger and return to relationships and community and live there. And they're so important that when you're in the immediate danger one, most of your body systems will shut down and make sure all the blood is available for the survival actions. And you really have to calm then until you can then redistribute even your blood flow so that you are ready to engage in a more normal human-like, connection and interaction. So that's one, the brain is organized then in a bottom-up, body-based up, and a top-down model. A lot of this is from Dan Siegel, who I studied with and just loved his work a lot, and some of the other folks in this field. The other way I tried to show how we're affected is it also, and then the left and the right, and a number of writers giving the notion of the specialization. So we do have a sense of sometimes getting locked into a binary. We just can't see anything except an either or, as opposed to seeing a more holistic relational view, you might say. And then the third dimension that I tried to capture, I called it from the back to the front, because the prefrontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex in the front, is really the opposite almost from the instinct generating responses and the more gross body control that happens further back. So anyway, that's the structures of that then help us to understand a little bit of what we're going through when reactivity comes up. And, little language that's been common now, when you become emotionally flooded, or when your heart rate hits 100 beats per minute, really, you're not going to be in shape for much interaction that's going to be productive overall. And bottom down, we get ideas, we get patterns in our head, and then everything we see fits into that, and reactivity locks us into those things. So in that whole process, phrases like self-soothing, or how do we then counter the reaction? And one way, and so that we can then activate the rest of our brain, one way the wheel makes a difference here is that you have in one page, in this circle, like Sherrod is saying, you really have almost these rooms of information that you can look at. And now you're really activating a whole nother area of the information flow when you see the image. And so by having a center in the wheel where you can put an issue, or you can go to calm so that you have a place to just stand, you can start to look and listen. This is why the awareness wheel and listening always go together, because you then look and you begin to listen to each of these zones, and you can stir a little curiosity, and you're interacting now with yourself rather than being provoked by others while you're on the awareness wheel. Let me stop there and see if that makes any sense so far with you.
It makes sense. I love it so much. I just know how reactive our brains can get, and to get to that space. I mean, maybe we're getting practical here, but to get to that space where we have curiosity and awareness, we have to get past the kind of initial threat response, fight, flight, reactivity, right? I mean, so obviously that's part of this. I know built in, because I love it being able to get to these places and be able to kind of explore the rooms. A lot of my couples, the reactivity happens so fast. And just immediate.
Yeah, Dan, you're so right. And so I don't want to pretend that it's just a simple process and all, but I do think that the awareness wheel creates a mental image that is an alternative to the nonverbal, triggering often responses that come out. And the more people use the awareness wheel, actually the more it burns into a mental image you carry. So the way the brain works, it's an anticipatory expectation machine. And if you have the awareness wheel that becomes something you're familiar with, that you've used, you have a little bit of an advantage, because you have something to go to that you're familiar with. It's about you. It's where you meet you, and you gain some experience of safety, which is, of course, a driving component of trauma, where you can step into the middle of this wheel. And on our pads and so on, we also have a timeout and a check process. You can step off, you can step on, you have agency when you're in there exploring your own inner world.
So this is a tool for communication, but it's also a tool to help sort of calm and sort of direct the brain and the neurology more effectively, rather than it sort of being over fused. I don't think that's the right word, but I'm going to use it. Overfused and sort of like going sideways.
System overload.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing it as, when you have awareness of that reactive, like Dan, you were saying, bottom up. In my mind, what I will teach folks is that's the moment you're probably not in a good space to continue this conversation, because the reactivity has flooded. I love the metaphor of rooms. How do I stand in the middle And so I see this wheel as a process of analysis. I stand when I've had the reaction. I'm not in a good space to continue. I stand in the middle of the wheel and I pivot. Okay, what are the behaviors that are happening here? What's happening for me? What's happening for them? Okay, do I have a good understanding? Next, pivot. Go to the next room. What am I seeing, smelling? And then going through that wheel as I kind of continue to pivot to do a 360. So I'm seeing this as an analysis structure to what's going on with me and why. What do I therefore need and want to discuss? And then kind of come out of that space and then share.
So
Do I have it?
Yeah, well, that was a question I had is, do people do the wheels ahead of time? Do they have their experience to say, okay, I want to communicate, so I'm going to go and do a wheel and then present it?
You know, you can do one before, you can do one during, you can do one after.
Okay.
And the other thing is we have a pad with wheels on it, just piece of paper, so that when I have an issue, for instance, if I can't get to sleep, this is pretty rare that I can't get to sleep, but
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, there's something that it's cranking. So I'll get up and pull a pad and fill it out. And I do it non-linearly. You don't have to go around sequentially. It's kind of what's in my awareness. I fill that, jump around, and keep going until I've got it filled out. And then I go back, turn off the light, lay down. Oh yeah, one more thing, turn on the light, fill in that one more piece, pull the light. Next thing I know, it's morning. And then I'm ready to have a conversation with somebody.
hey, can you just take
I mean,
made up,
excuse me.
can you just take a made up issue and just walk us through an example of how you might use the awareness wheel to work through something that's sitting and keeping you up at night?
Yeah. Yes, and say I'm in a work situation and on a committee, and every time we get together, I have a sense I'm being put down by somebody in the room. And this is a pretty high level, you know, executive group, and we're making some really tough decisions. And I go home really angry and upset, and I find myself avoiding this guy and the meetings themselves. And so the reactivity is inside every time I think of this guy. You know, I think he's a jerk. And then what do I do about it? And I just kind of live in blind reflex. So once a person learns the wheel, gets some experience with it, okay, what's going on here? So I fill out a wheel, maybe I do it on a piece of paper. And by the way, the other was, we have these skill mats, about 30-inch square, that go on the floor of the wheel, and you stand on it. And particularly working with a counselor or a coach, take the issue at the center of the wheel. This is my focus. And then I begin to work around it. So if I was working with you, Tim, and I come to you, here's my problem. And you know, this guy at work. And so you say, well, let's map the issue. We call it, by the way, the awareness wheel, a map. So I'm working with Tim. Tim says, let's map this issue at work. And so he puts the mat down on the floor, or maybe I would have worked it out on paper before coming a little bit, or that we just do it fresh on the floor. So I get on and I start to move around, and first focus, well, the issue is my relationship with this guy, Jack, I'll call him. So anyway, I then began to move. What comes to awareness first? Well, what I first go is to sense data and say, in the meetings, whenever I speak, which is my action, and I move over there quickly, when I talk in the meetings or make an idea, very often what I see him do is push back in his chair, shake his head. That'll never work. And yeah, I see it reoccurring so that I think, and then I step on thoughts that this is a pattern and, I don't really know how to break through it, what to do differently. What I'm stuck with and I go to motion is, I'm just so angry going to work. When I think I got to see this guy and I've got to deal with him, but it's not working. And I think it's affecting my health. So I go back up to thoughts. Or if I stood there on motion saying, I think Tim would take his foot and tap thoughts and move me over there unobtrusively. It's just a quick, we calling aligning, trying to match my words with the rooms on the wheel. So anyway, Tim might say to me, well, what do you want in this situation? And so I step over on that zone and I say, well, what I really want is to be able to fully participate and be valued. Yeah, okay, anything else? Well, I think that's pretty much it. I think I've got some, and I jump over to thoughts. I've got some good things to offer, but it doesn't, I don't think I get the chance. And then Tim might take me back to wants for other. Is there anything based that of his interest that's important to him that you would want for him, you could help him get? Oh, geez. Yeah, get a different job. And Tim would say, no, that's not his interest. That's yours.
yours.
Okay. That could be a want for you. That's legit. Okay. But what have you heard him say is important to him or he'd want? Well, what happens in the meetings? He's so action oriented. He wants it to happen now and now. So I would like for him to have some things move faster. Yeah, that would be okay. And then now are there stakeholders here too on this zone? Anything for the people that are going to be impacted? Oh yeah, I think what I want for them is to have clear direction from this meeting and this our reports coming out of this event. Yeah, and I think they would want that. That's in their interest to know where to go next. So then anything else, say Tim says to me, and I drop to center. I go 2 inches below my navel, press in, call it chi, whatever you want, realizing that I'm kind of riled up. So what do you want? Tim is a non-anxious presence. He doesn't jump in, start telling me what to do. He might even say, why don't you go around the wheel one more time? I say, no, here's what I want to do. I want to meet with him and talk about our relationship. I can't tell you exactly why I think that would work, but what I'll do is I'm going to fill out a wheel on how I see us relate and ask him and say, could the two of us just meet and talk about this and how our relationship is impacting our committee? Would you be willing to talk with me about that? And Tim would say, go back to emotions for a minute. And how do you feel there when you're in that conversation? Comfortable. I mean, a little anxious, yeah, but mainly I think talking about could help. That's kind of what we're talking about.
So at the conclusion of going through that process, is it correct to say that once you have a good clarity for yourself about your experience of what you want or want for others, for example,
Right.
that then there's that problem solving element of now what would you like to do about it?
Right.
Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up, is future action is marked off in the action zone.
Okay.
So there's current and past, but there's future. So in that, the key word there is will. What do I commit to doing next steps? So I commit to Tim, hey, before next week, I'm going to set up a meeting and do it. And Tim might, have some other questions or so, but to hold me accountable or to follow up, or if that doesn't work, no, it didn't work, what's another, we do another wheel.
Well, Sherrod, I'm glad I could be helpful to you today.
Good job, Tim.
You are such a great therapist, Tim.
Can I
I
just
feel
say,
better already.
I love that you add will, because I key in on language. I have so many clients that say I might, or I'll try to, or
I
I think I
could.
can, or I could, or I all that. And I love that I will. What's my commitment? I think that's really, there's something there that I think holds the self and then holds you accountable. I mean, I love that part of an action step as well.
Sometimes people stand on the future action zone. Well, I could do this or I could do that. And then I quickly move them over to thoughts. These are thoughts,
Nice.
possibilities. Okay. When you actually are ready, what you will do, next step, small next step, if it's a big issue, step over onto future action and use the word. Yeah.
Now, can I ask you all a quick question? Now,
Yeah.
Sherrod just gave you the circle on the wheel with the 5 zones and what's about and the center, and then he told you a story. Now, tell me, were you putting his comments into a zone as he was speaking? Were you beginning to kind of sort out his input, really put it in the room that it belonged just as you were listening? Now, maybe that's an unfair thing to say, but do you, just with that short of an idea of this graphic, this image that organizes the inner experiences that we have, the different data streams that we get coming in, that when you start to listen, then you'll hear a word like, well, I just think you're being, and you just start organizing the other person's experience as you're listening, let alone your own tracking. You can use the wheel to track, and in a way, that's the listening function. But once you have that in there, honestly, it's hard not to use it until your heart rate goes over 120. But
well, it's so with clients, a lot of times it's teaching them the distinction between thoughts and feelings and behavior and what are some of the other ones? What wants and desires. So it's really beautiful that you're teaching them the distinctions between different parts of their internal process.
We do, excuse me, we do that in the workshop, or excuse me, in the workbook, the chapter that does just lays out what goes in what zone, which in my experience, I've seen therapists who are clear about the zone, do beautiful work. Sometimes there's mud by accepting thoughts for feelings or thoughts for data, this is not a semantic word game, but these 5 zones are qualitatively different information.
Yeah.
And coupled with the wants for others, which can be transformational. You stay at a first order until you start to think about how does this impact you and how can we build in your interests.
That concept of wants for others, I think, is so important. I think about the addicts and the partners we work with, and it's so easy for either side to get stuck on, I want them to do this because I want her to stop being pissed off and angry so that I don't have to deal with her emotions. I want him to just go do his program and just get sober so I don't have to deal with the anxiety and the fear and just do it. And when you shift that from what do I want them to do so that I feel better, but what is it that I want for them?
Based on their interest.
That's a whole different dynamic shift of what am I willing to do in my recovery program, because that's going to support my partner to get something that they're going to find helpful. What am I willing to do in my healing program, because I really want the addict that I'm involved with to be able to find that inner calm and peace that comes with successful recovery and sobriety. And that, what do I want for that person, that altruistic kind of perspective. I think it really has the potential to open up some pretty profound change.
Do you
I
find,
go
I'm
ahead.
really curious, do you find that some, especially with couples, that maybe one person in the couple leads with thoughts and the other person leads with feelings, and that can cause challenges?
Well, individual differences are there, and you can see them on the wheel, certainly.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to pick up also on, Tim, what was your last comment?
About doing things for other people and how it can really open up more of an altruistic.
Oh, thank you. Um, this is diagnostic. In my experience, when I've met a couple who can't want for each other, that relationship's in trouble, particularly when it's mutual, because, you know, we want to give and take and help each other and enjoy. But if it's all about me, or it's all about you, and we can't bridge that, we're in trouble. We can also be in trouble, and I've seen this relationship where one person's willing to want for the other, but it's not reciprocal. It's like driving with a flat tire. Um, so what we're really working for and working with couples is how can we help them recognize each other's interests and, to the extent possible, build those interests in. Also, in view of the comment you just made, Wendy, um, about individual differences. You know, I've some people are real detailed and, well, you know, think Myers-Briggs and, you know, those kind of other ways, schemes of looking at relationship. But given our individual differences, how can we help each other grow, thrive, and help those around us? You know, that's really what we're after, trying to communicate that. And the skill gives us some tools and the maps to move in those directions.
I,
And you have more? Yeah.
yeah, just to add a bit, I think the wants for others absolutely is transformational. The other area in the awareness wheel that I think also is transformational is catching a reaction and even being able to start to name it. You know, it's the old thing, you name it to tame it in terms of using cognition to help calm. But even to be able to say, what is a reaction and what are my, the second chapter in our second workbook is what causes me to react. And so, and then that includes even a sense of how do I know it? Where do I first feel it in my body? So it helps to build a link between the person's self-awareness and the person's body connection. And if you have done awareness training or mindfulness training, you know it's such a crucial part of being able to anchor one's sense of safety in one's own body and feel that begin to change there. So the earlier you can catch that and then have something to do with it. So once you have a sense, you feel, you get a sense that's a reaction, then you have something to engage. So you can then look at rebalancing. You can look at centering. So you, like Sherrod was saying, you can start to calm your own body and use your breath to that. But then you have something else that you can go to. So once you're on this train, you could say, once you get there, so after you've caught this signal, and then after you rebalance and you center, then you can start to reflect. And this is where, Jeannie, I would say analysis is crucial, but actually I think engagement, just beginning to engage, just to use a government, just turning toward each of those rooms and having a sense of understanding or learning what's the difference between this and starting to catch yourself after you've had good coaching like this. And then once you begin to reflect, then you're able to consider being able to respond with choice, make a constructive action instead of that. So we call those the 4 R's in the workbook, where you recognize, you rebalance, you reflect, and then respond.
What a fabulous tool you guys have put together. And
Could I just interject one more thing?
One thing.
One thing. My own addictive behavior. So what am I doing right now that's starting to set that up? raising that question. What am I seeing, hearing, maybe tasting, smelling? Wow, I've got a choice. Next step. What am I thinking? Oh, I'm just one more time. You know, I can stop tomorrow. What's the emotion I'm feeling? I'm kind of bored. This would give me, you know, a little rush, get me going again. What do I want? Well, I don't really want to, but I think I do want to. Whatever, I have mixed wants, powerful forces. What do I want for the other? Oh, I don't care. I don't think about them. What's my action? Literally, in any of these zones, these parts, or these windows or rooms, whatever, you have a choice between one step to the next. That's it.
That's such a great tool. And I really appreciate you bringing it back and sort of using an addiction struggle as an example there. So your guys' books, the Awareness Wheel Workbook Volumes 1 and Volumes 2, can be found, I assume, most places people can buy books.
No, it's just right now available only through awarenesswheel.com.
Okay, so go to awarenesswheel.com. If you want more information, you can go to couplescommunication.com. But what a great
Couplecommunication.com.
couplecommunication.com.
Singular, yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for all of our listeners out there, please take time to go rate our podcast wherever you're listening to our podcast. It really helps us to be introduced to new people who would like to join this conversation. And if you have questions you would like us to address in a mailbag episode, please send those to us at conversations.sar@gmail.com. Thank you, as always, for joining our conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.